Welcome back to another Tech Junkie video. Today I've got two iPhone XS Maxes that I bought from a customer. Both are broken. One needs a back glass replacement, one needs a screen replacement. I paid $450 for the pair of phones. I paid an additional $100 for parts that needed to be used. Once restored in good condition, these phones will be worth about $500 each. I do spend a fair percentage of my day looking for broken phones on the internet. One of my favorite things to do is to buy something that looks like trash and then make it look new again. When I first bought this laser machine, I caught myself watching the laser do its work. Each pass takes about 15 minutes, and you don't want to just stand there for 15 minutes at a time staring at the laser, but it is quite fun to look at, especially when it's a new piece of equipment that you haven't used before, but you've heard nothing but great things about. Back glass replacement was not an option for us before we bought this laser machine. If a customer had a phone that had a broken back glass, we would just opt for a housing swap, and housing swaps are generally much more expensive than replacing just the back glass, so it's more preferable to change just the back glass than changing the housing. Now here we're going to go ahead and jump over on the other phone that needs a screen, also an iPhone XS Max. After 5 minutes on the heat mat at 75 degrees Celsius, we start taking the pentalobe screws out of the bottom of the phone. That way we can start the removal of the screen. When a phone comes in that hasn't been repaired previously and only the glass is damaged, especially on the iPhone X and up models, we try our very best to get that screen off without further damaging the screen. These screens can be recycled, and the newer the phone, the more money that you can get out of that recycled screen. As a habit, once I get the screen cut away from the frame of the phone, I check the OLED panel again to make sure there's no additional damage caused by prying the screen off. If there is no additional damage, we can recycle that screen and get a little bit of money back for our parts. There are two metal plates that cover your battery connector and your OLED panel connector, with it covered by a total of 6 screws. Each of these screws are tri-wing screws. Remove all 6 screws, disconnect your battery, disconnect the 2 OLED panel connectors, and disconnect your Face ID sensor connector. Now we can work on removing the Face ID sensor from the screen and transferring that over to the new screen. There are 3 tri-wing screws that hold this ear speaker piece and Face ID module down. Carefully remove it. It is held down by some glue, so a little bit of heat would help this process a little bit. Once you get the sensors completely removed, you can transfer them over to the new screen and replace the 3 tri-wing screws. If you damage this module that controls your ear speaker, your proximity sensor, and your Face ID, you can replace it, but soldering is required to maintain Face ID. If you don't care about Face ID, then you can always just replace the entire assembly and move on. You just won't have Face ID in the future. Once you get these screws back in place, you're free to put the screen back on the phone. Make sure all of your connections are in place and secure. Make sure you feel that crunch, that satisfying click. If you don't get that click, chances are your screen is going to ghost or have no touch function. You want to make sure that all your connections are in place as they should be. There are 7 screws down here at the bottom. They're all tri-wing screws. You have 3 in the first plate and then 4 in the second plate. There are 2 types of screens that you can use for this screen repair. There are aftermarket LCD screens and there are aftermarket OLED screens. You can get an aftermarket LCD screen for as cheap as $70, $75. They're poor quality. The color saturation doesn't look nearly as good, but you can go that route if you want to get a cheap screen. If you want to go with the best quality screen, OLED is always the ways to go. You're going to pay more for an OLED panel, but it's going to be closer to the original quality than if you went with one of the cheaper LCD displays. Once you get your final screws in there, it's time to close the screen back up. It is a good practice to turn your phone on and test your screen before you close it completely up. If for some reason one of the connectors is off or something's not in place and the screen has no touch function and you have to open it back up, you run the risk of damaging the screen trying to take it back off. So it's always a good practice to test the screen before you snap it back in place. If everything is working how it normally would work, everything's working fine, you can go ahead and snap all your teeth back in place. Insert the screen in at the top first and then feed the teeth along the side, and then put your pentalobe screws back in down at the bottom. And the screen repair is done on one of the XS Maxes. Now we're going to move back over to the one that needs back glass. After the laser process is done, you get to start chipping the glass away from the back glass of the screen. Being that I've only had my laser machine for a few months now, this is still the most satisfying part for me. This is the most fun. I like playing with new toys, and this is still a toy to me. I love taking the back glass off with the laser machine, sitting down with my rubber gloves, with my mask and my glasses, and chipping that glass away. It's something that I didn't think possible before the laser machine was available for purchase, and now it's just one of those things that I love to do. If a customer walks in the door and they need back glass replacement done, that's my favorite repair to do at the moment. And my hands do look good in those black gloves, I have to say. I'm not going to be conceited about it, but I really rock those black gloves pretty well. If there is one part about back glass removal that's tedious, it's removing the glass from around the camera lens. On your templates, you have to make sure that the laser doesn't touch your camera lens. You don't want it to damage any internal components. You don't want it to damage that camera. That camera is expensive to replace. So the byproduct of that is the glass is really adhered to the frame around that camera lens, and it's really tedious and time consuming removing that glass away from that camera lens. You can remove the entire back glass from the back of the phone in the time it takes to chip away the glass from around the camera lens. And if you don't get the camera glass out all the way, you run the risk of your new back glass not fitting properly on the back of your phone. Once you do remove all the glass away from that camera lens and off the back plate, it's time for a second pass of the laser. This part of the laser process is not mandatory, but it removes all the remnants of glue from the back of the phone. It also removes all the ash. It allows for an easier cleanup process before you adhere your new back glass back to the frame. You can run this laser pass as many times as you want, or you don't have to run it at all. I always run it a second time just because it makes it easier to put the new back glass on, and it gets any remaining remnants of glass shards or anything like that off the phone. Once that pass is done, you go through with your blade and take all the old ash and old glue away that's left from the laser. You want to make sure that your frame is as flush as possible so that you have no gaps between your back frame and the new glass that's going to go on your phone. You want your new glass to fit on there perfectly. Once you get all the remaining glass shards and glue away from your frame, it's time to use, we use cold press glue here, adhere that new glass into place. You can use it as much as you want, just keep it away from any internal components, keep it away from your charge coil, and keep it away from your camera. You want to use as much as you need to. I don't like to put it along the borders because I don't like it to seep out the sides. But once you have enough glue on there, you can apply your back glass and make sure your back glass is on there flush. I use rubber bands instead of clamps.
1 hour later.
So rubber bands are the way to go. After about an hour of waiting for the glue to dry, you can remove your rubber bands, and the most satisfying part is removing that plastic away from that phone and seeing that glass all brand new again. For your viewing pleasure, we slowed this process down so you could see it in all of its glory. $450 for 2 phones, $100 worth of parts, and now we have $1,000 for 2 iPhone XS Maxes. We basically doubled our money with just a few hours of labor and the investment in the laser machine. Over time, the laser machine will pay for itself. Thank you for watching another Tech Junkie video. If you like these videos, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We have more content on the way, and thanks again.